we started the Athens Observer in 1974, again on a shoestring, and at that point we were in my former wife Chatham's art studio down where the apartments are now, across from the Holiday Inn. At that time there was a row of brick buildings and a few urban apartments there, and the Doghouse Bar on the bottom floor. And Chatham let us use her studio, and she contributed her illustrations to the paper and to the ads and gave it its distinctive look. And it's interesting also that this was right on the cusp of a technological breakthrough known as photo offset printing. Prior to this time, in order to make a newspaper, you had to know how to set type on a linotype machine. But now it had become computerized, and it made it possible for people like us to think about doing our own paper. And so we borrowed some money from some friends of Chuck's, some liberal do-gooders in Washington, and they lent us enough money to buy a couple of CompuGraphic typesetting machines. And I remember being out on the street the day they were delivered and asked the guy if I could help him get them off the truck, and he said no, he knew how to do it. And I was making conversation, and I said, "Do you deliver a lot of these machines?" He said, "Yep. I pick up a lot of them too." So but we did survive, and again, you know, the community rallied around. People came in and wrote about art and took pictures. Don Nelson broke his leg in a construction accident and didn't have anything to do, and he came around and taught himself how to set up a dark room and take pictures, and before long he was a co-publisher along with Chuck and me. And David Griffith, still the attorney of Flagpole, had been hanging around the United Free Press doing draft counseling during the Vietnam War. And he helped us get organized with the Observer. He won a landmark open records case against the university. He successfully defended the Observer being designated the legal organ for Clark County. And I used to call him the full-service attorney. He would haul a load of wood. He would come fix your flat tire. He did wills and divorces and adoptions for all the staff for as long as we were there. And he's still going strong. He's still a part of the community that supports this community journalism. And you know, just again, looking around the room, Jimmy Cornelison went broke in the dry cleaning business when all the students started wearing T-shirts and jeans instead of pressed pants and pressed shirts. And Jimmy decided he wanted to be a writer, so he had a desk and a lamp and a typewriter, and he brought them up and set them up, didn't ask for any money, and just started writing about sports. We didn't have anybody writing about sports. And eventually he became indispensable, and we had to start paying him. Phil Williams was working over at the Madisonian over in Madison, and he admired what we were doing, and he would drop by every now and then. And finally he convinced us that the Observer might be even better if we had a real editor. And so we hired Phil, and he really put us on the map. We started winning lots of awards in the Georgia Press Association, and Phil made us a giant step forward, and then went off to the university and started writing novels, and he's written 19 books and published them to great acclaim so far. He just told me he's through writing, but I don't believe it. I'm sure he's got another one in him. So again, it's just everywhere I look, I see my old friend Sonny Thurmond over there. We grew up together in Greensboro, and I got my start with Sonny on the Tiger Tidings, the newspaper for the Greensboro High School. So, and then shortly after we got started, Fred Smith and Mike Thurmond had just gotten out of Payne College in Augusta, and they came to town and started the Athens Voice, a wonderful newspaper primarily covering the African American community. And they were so much involved in that community that newspaper wasn't enough for them. That Mike went on into politics, and Fred ever since has been a community activist and a conscience of this community. So it's just, again, amazing how the concept of community journalism is not just something that you put upon the community, but the community puts it on you. And there's so many people here like Gwen O'Looney, who, how many stories has Gwen O'Looney given us? How would we have put out a newspaper without Gwen O'Looney? And I mean, and that's so true that, you know, Rick Rose and Florence King back there always putting on plays. They got one opening tonight. And, you know, we've tried to cover the arts, and Brent Anderson is president of Town and Gown. She's back there, and she's always in a play or directing it. And my wife, Gay. I married Gay. Gay was in the Academy Theater in Atlanta, a star over there, and I was a stage door Johnny. I was driving to Atlanta every weekend and trying to date Gay in between her performances, and finally convinced her to marry me and come over here. Well, what did I do? I took advantage of her acting ability to put her in charge of collections for the Athens Observer. And I could tell who she was talking to on the phone by which voice she was using, you know. And when she was pregnant with our daughter Molly, she would go, if she had a particularly recalcitrant customer, she would go sit in their waiting room 8 months pregnant until they were felt so guilty they'd come out and hand her a check. And Molly grew up in the Observer. We were her after-school daycare. When she got out of daycare, she would come to the Observer and read and sit on the front couch, and it was right next to a gumball machine. I'd give her a couple of quarters, and she'd eat gumballs all afternoon and read Roald Dahl. And then by the time we had Flagpole, she was writing about music for Flagpole, and I think I burned her out about the time she was 12 years old, but she did a famous interview with Michael Stipe that you can still Google up somewhere here and there. So, you know, it's just, I'm tempted to say everybody who has not had something to do with one of these publications stand up, and I don't believe anybody would stand up in this room. So I could go on, but I will mention too that another of Chuck's innovations was the idea of Observer Television. So we started Observer Television. Phil Williams had graduated from this august school with a degree in TV, so we naturally put him in charge of it, not telling him that, again, we didn't have any money to buy all that expensive equipment, but there was a pharmacist over in Greensboro who had some extra money, and we borrowed a good bit of money from him to buy that expensive equipment. And I had many a phone call. He was very polite, but he wanted to know when that next payment was coming. And I wanted to know that too, but I didn't tell him that. But so if you remember Observer Television, Chuck contracted with M.M. Victory from Birmingham, who owned Liberty Cable. And M.M.'s modus operandi was to come over here with several of his retainers and set up at the Holiday Inn bar and do business from there. And Chuck fortunately had the ability to to drink as much as M.M. did. I couldn't do it. I had to go home, but and I was married anyway, and I knew I better go home. But Chuck hung in there with M.M. long enough to get them to agree to let us have a cable-originated channel. And then, of course, the question was what to do with it. We assumed that the Observer staff would be happy to create enough news to fill up a new TV station, but it didn't work out quite that way. And so we had a lot of time to fill. We subscribed to a UPI feed, which was what is like now the crawl across the bottom of the screen. We were ahead of our time. We originated the crawl in television in Athens, Georgia. And we didn't have any, all it was just, you know, little news blips. So we thought, well, we don't have any sound. And I conceived the great idea that at that time, this was before WUGA, there was no NPR in Athens. So I went over to WABE in Atlanta and asked them if it'd be okay if we ran their music and news and everything under on our blank screen. They didn't understand what I was talking about, and it may have been illegal, but they finally said I could do it. And so for a while there, you could read the news in the little UPI crawl, and then you could hear the Atlanta news and a lot of classical music. So anyway, we brought NPR to Athens, and fairly shortly after that, WGAU got started. And you remember that incredible period they went through with Mary Kay Mitchell and David Bryant and all those folks who were doing all that local journalism on the radio station. David did that incredible tracing of the Oconee River from its origins up in North Georgia all the way down to the Altamaha. And I mean, just an incredible oral picture, complete with music and commentary and interviewing people all along the way. That's the kind of stuff they were doing, and it was a golden age of local NPR radio. And again, just another facet of this rich community of local community news. And then, of course, I was lucky enough to, I got out of the Observer. Millard Grimes bought my interest in the Observer, and I couldn't figure out anything to do. I wrote a couple of bad novels that I would read. I'd write all day and then read it to Gay in the evening, and she would listen to them, and then finally she'd say, you know that guy Ralph that got on the train down at the station here and went up to Commerce? I said, yeah, I know. Yeah, Ralph, yeah. And she said, you killed him yesterday. So my motto has always been, everybody needs a editor. But anyway, Flagpole came along, started by Jared Bailey to feel the need to publicize the new music scene. And but wait, I've left out one. Speaking of the music scene, do you remember Tasty World? Yeah. Tasty World. Tasty World started in 1984. A fellow named David Bryant. David Pierce. Thank you. David Hannon Pierce had this great idea to cover this music scene that was just getting started. And he had a wonderful eye for graphics, and he knew a lot of people who wanted to help with that enterprise. So Chuck and I backed it. What did that mean? Poor David, he thought he had backing, but all he had was Chuck and me. And we set up offices in the Georgian Hotel. That may sound prestigious to you at this point, but this was the period when the Georgian Hotel had gone totally bust and was just a shell of itself. It looked like a bombed-out hotel that you would see in the movies. And, the rooms had wires hanging down and trash in the halls and carpet rolled up. And So we had a couple of offices in there, and put out this fantastic magazine. Our friend Dennis Waters, who used to sell Observers over in front of the library, had a big Observer umbrella, and he would catch everybody coming out of the library, sell them a paper for $10. I mean, 10 cents, excuse me, 10 cents. Chuck would have sold it for $10, but I lost my train of thought. Where was I? I was talking about.
Tasty World.
Thank you. And Tasty World, the Athens music scene was exploding, and it was writing all these beautiful stories about it, but there was no advertising base. There were very few clubs. There were no record companies, and so we just couldn't figure out how to make it work. And finally, after, I think, less than a year, Tasty World was no more. But not to worry, here came Flagpole. Jared owned the 40 watt and felt the need to publicize his club and the others that were beginning finally to spring up here, and started Flagpole. Dennis Greenier quickly came along and showed him how to do it right, and got it going. And then at one point, Dennis hired me. I was working for the Auto Trader magazine, trying to keep my hand in the journalistic field, and taking pictures of cars and writing the descriptions. If you need a picture of your car taken, I know how to do it. And then, damn it, sorry, another senior moment. So Dennis hired me off the street to come be business manager of Flagpole, which sounded great to me back in the journalism thing, so I took him up on it, came, and I quickly noticed that Dennis's brother Joe was already the business manager. And Joe resented somebody else offering to take the deposits as they were to the bank or anything like that. So I finally realized this was not the time to get back in the newspaper business. But the only thing I did of any note during that short period was to sit in on the hiring of Alicia Nichols, who was a graduate of this, just graduated from this college, and was working at Harry Bissett's, if that's what it was called at the time, and wanted to moonlight selling ads for Flagpole. And she started doing it and never looked back. She soon was the advertising manager. Eventually, I did get into Flagpole, and eventually Alicia and I bought out the other partners and still own it today. And as in any organization, there's got to be somebody who knows how to run it. And at Flagpole, that is Alicia Nichols. She has kept us on task. She still does. She is widely involved in the community through AthFest and many other endeavors such as Canopy and Trapeze. And she personifies the kind of involvement that really makes a local paper rich and involved. And the same is true for the rest of our staff. Larry Tenner, our production director, is a longtime musician here. He's an artist, he's a designer. He designed the book of my columns that we recently published. I could go on and on. Jessica Smith, who is in charge of our calendar, our arts coverage, is also in charge of the distribution. She is a wizard at finding somebody to drive those papers out to all the stores, and regardless of the weather. And our longtime head of distribution, Charles Greenleaf, is an artisan with tile. He's also a musician. Again, just another example of how the folks at Flagpole are tied in with the community, like Gabe Vodicka, our music editor and managing editor, is also a musician and knows all about music. Stephanie Rivers, our office manager, keeps us all organized and is also in the process of taming a couple of feral cats that have been hanging around the outside of the building. It's, in my opinion, it's only a matter of less than a week before they're inside. So, and so that again, it does take a community to support a paper and to interact with a paper and to make it what it is. Our semi-anonymous donors who are responsible for this incredible award, so honoring to me and so encouraging to those who follow after us in community journalism, have requested that I read a selection from this book that Flagpole published, the collection of my pub notes columns. And I can think of no more appropriate one of these columns to end with than the last one, which is entitled A Wonderful Life, and as you will see is a takeoff on the movie It's a Wonderful Life. And it was written, believe it or not, when you hear it, it was written 16 years ago. At the end of 2001, so you might even say it is prophetic. The subtitle is "The Columnist Wonders Whether His Writing Has Made Any Difference at All." I was standing on the Mitchell Bridge railing, ready to jump into the middle Oconee and end it all. 25 years of writing columns about making Athens a better place to live, and what difference had it made? Just before I took the plunge, some guy named Clarence walked up. "Hold on a minute, Pete," he said. "How did you know my name?" I asked, wondering if he came out of Ben Burton Park. "I'm your guardian angel," Clarence answered. I turned around to jump. "You've been given a great gift, Pete, a chance to see what the world would be like without you," Clarence said. "What difference does it make?" I asked. "You might be surprised," Clarence said. "Hold on." The next thing I knew, we were sailing through the air out over the Atlanta highway. Below us, I could see a new Jaguar convertible speeding along, driven by an attractive woman with blonde, curly hair. "Who's that?" I asked Clarence. "That's Gay," he said. "Since you weren't around, she married a doctor. She never had to know the life of a small-town newspaper publisher's wife. The second-hand Volvos, the angry readers, the late nights. Why are we flying over the Atlanta highway?" I asked. "I wanted you to see what it would look like if you'd never been born, if you'd never written all those columns," Clarence said. "It looks just the same," I said. "Strip mall developments choked with fast traffic, no trees, no place to walk, hodgepodge subdivisions." Clarence said, peering down. "So it does." "But look over there toward Prince Avenue. See those vicious drivers trying to run that bicyclist into the curb? That's the kind of thing that would be going on today if you hadn't made the mayor promise bike lanes for Prince Avenue all those years ago." "Clarence," I said, "maybe in heaven a promise is a promise, but..." "Look down there," Clarence said. "There's a good example. See old Hugh Logan? See, without your hard-hitting editorials, old Hugh would still be a commissioner," which he was at the time. "Clarence," I said, "you must be outside our circulation area." "But look here," he said, turning toward downtown and dropping lower for a closer look. "You remember how beautiful downtown was when you first started pushing for historic preservation. Here's how it would look with no protection." "I see it every day," I said. "You really know how to hurt a guy." "Well, look at it this way," Clarence said. "If you hadn't written all those columns and kept the pressure on, Athens, Clark County would be controlled by a few out-of-town banks, the big law firms that work for them, and their biggest depositors, and a mayor and commission who do anything they want. In other words, Athens would be the most developer-friendly place this side of Oconee County. What's more, the whole town would be overrun with luxury student apartments, hostile to poor people and hemmed in by sprawl with no more green space than a mall parking lot. Then I noticed a beautiful stand of hardwoods stretching out beyond the horizon. Well, at least there would be some beauty left if I had never been born, I said. What's that? Oh, that, Clarence said. That's all the trees that didn't get cut down to print all those newspapers that didn't carry your columns. Stop, I said. I can't stand any more of this. Get me back to that bridge before the drought makes the water any lower. But if I don't save your life, I can't get my wings, he stammered. Clarence, I said, this looks like the beginning of a beautiful friendship. I think you got the wrong movie, he said, and then I woke up. Thank goodness it was just a nightmare.
One of the best things about this award, maybe the best thing about this award, besides getting to sort of cheer Pete, is that it brings this community together, with Grady. 30 years ago, I was a grad student here and was working then for, I can't even remember, the princely sum of $4 an hour or something for the Athens Banner-Herald. And I took a news writing class from a woman named Merrill Morris, who changed the direction of my life in many ways. First of all, by teaching me how to flip and write, which I hadn't really learned to that point, and then convincing me to leave that princely job at the Athens Banner-Herald for an even more princely job at the Athens Observer as a barely paid intern. That job in many ways changed the trajectory of my entire life. And so it's not without occasion that we gather a bunch of Athens people around an Athens institution to honor an Athens institution. So thank you. Please join us outside. It's such a gorgeous day. We've got some food and drink out, so come on, join us out here, and we'll get you out of here in time for the Cine Gala, which I know some of you are off to. Thank you very much for being with us.